Hi, I'm Russell Sturgis. I'm the author of The Spiritual Roots of the Tarot, the Cathar code hidden in the cards. I'd like to take some of your time today to tell you a little bit about the book, what it's about, and how you would benefit by taking the time to read it. I want to start by just reading the last paragraph that's in the introduction of my book. And it reads, "The Cathar code is a detailed description of the journey for making the transition from ignorance to awareness and on to being mindful, which results in enlightenment, or as the Cathar described it, finding the kingdom of heaven. That journey includes encountering the dark night of the soul and its test of the flaming sword. It also includes the necessary instructions for adopting Christ consciousness, along with a whole new set of values, which leads to the test of the cherubim. Finally, you encounter the Hieros Gamos, the sacred marriage that brings you to your encounter with the Holy Grail. Only then can you finally enter the kingdom of heaven. Each step of the way is clearly marked, and the Cathar code, hidden in the Marseille Tarot, is a clearly signposted template for making your way along this pilgrimage. The pilgrimage begins." This book is an exploration of the idea that the fundamental teachings of this medieval Gnostic Christian sect, which we call the Cathar, were captured into a set of images that I call portable stained glass windows after their demise, and were later referred to as the tarot. Their core theology, and I call it a theology of love, was depicted in the trumps, which was a series of, or a set of 22 images that later became part of the Marseille Tarot. And these 22 images were numbered, except for one. They sort of had a sequence. And what my book does is explores these 22 images and really uncovers a very deep, mystical, profound spiritual journey that's about finding that place of entry into the kingdom of heaven or enlightenment. If you want to use Christian terms, it's about the process of salvation and achieving atonement. And it's a beautifully depicted journey that I have detailed in the course of this book in being able to lay it out in very simple terms and in terms that are very practical. Now, I want to say from the outset that there's lots of people write about the Holy Grail, and they write about the pathway to enlightenment and all those sorts of things. And in many cases, what you end up reading is theory and people's speculation about what those things look like. I want to say to you right from the outset that after I discovered the hidden key that unlocked the deep mysteries that were in these 22 picture cards, I was guided in taking these things and putting them together into a formula that later became known as the Enhancers Awareness Program. And this is a very structured format where we use the knowledge and understanding that was gleaned from having uncovered this knowledge and put into a mentoring program where for the last decade, hundreds of people have been mentored by myself and other people who've been trained to use this technique that has literally transformed people's lives from suffering and lives that are without purpose and directionless, to lives that have joy, clarity of purpose, sense of fulfillment, inner peace. And so this has been not only sort of described, it's been tested. We've done road tests for it for 10 years. And what I've been able to ascertain from this is that this works. If you'd like to know more about that part of this work, please go to www.eapmentor.com, where you can find out about the mentoring program that came as a result of this work. While I'm making suggestions about following through on links, to find out more about me and my work and the approach that I take to this work, go to www.westernmindfulness.com.au. So Western Mindfulness has a .com.au, EAP Mentor is just a .com. If you'd like to find out more about some of my insights around my book, please go to my Facebook page on my book, which is called The Spiritual Roots of the Tarot. And if you subscribe to that, every couple of weeks I put a blog that looks at different aspects of the book, and I go into a little bit more detail about that. So let's come back to the Cathar and let's talk about them a little bit and where the tarot fits into all of this. The Cathar were Gnostic Christians that emerged in particularly southern France, across the Pyrenees into northern Italy during the 12th century, going into the 13th century. And it was literally a church that I would say was based on a theology of love. And part of that was evidenced by the fact that these people referred to themselves as the good men and good women, and that was about the fact that they were good Christians. They were people who lived with a model of kindness for themselves, kindness for other people, and kindness for the planet. And what happened was that, particularly in southern France, and it also happened in northern Italy, that there was a real sense of alignment with these people from the nobles, because these people were hardworking, they were honest, they were kind people, and they were the sorts of people that anyone would want to have as part of their kingdom. And of course, given that they had those particular virtues, they were taxpayers and they were honest in that. And so they developed great favour. Another thing that was really important to them was that it was a religion that honoured women. And in fact, they had women priests, and women were seen as equals. And this was certainly not common throughout Europe at this particular time. And so what happened was that the Roman Catholic Church became, I'm going to use the word, discombobulated by the popularity that was emerging with these people. And as a result, the decision was made, after attempts failed to convert them to Catholicism, it was decided to initiate a crusade. Now, normally the crusades were against the heathens in Jerusalem and other places, but all of a sudden, here we have a crusade that's being carried out, and ultimately it was by the northern nobles of France against the southern nobles of France and the Cathar. And this crusade started in 1209 and went on for 20 years. And during that time, tens of thousands of Cathars, and in some cases Catholics, were executed, either burnt at the stake or murdered in very brutal ways in some cases, in an attempt to get rid of this religion. The crusade is an expensive exercise and couldn't be sustained, and even after 20 years they hadn't successfully got rid of the Cathar. And certainly by 1230 and just shortly after that, the church initiated the Inquisition, and over a period of 100 years the church eventually succeeded in completely eliminating the Cathars. And so what we had was this really amazing situation where we had a religion where it was one that was based on kindness and devotion. And I want to share what, and this is part of what the issue became with, in terms of how people were honouring and relating to the priests of the Cathar versus the priests of the Catholic Church. So the perfecti, as they were called, or the perfects, and they were given this name because of this pious life that they lived. I write that they have forsaken their attachment to power, wealth, love and fame. Now, power, wealth, love and fame are depicted in the tarot cards by the power card is represented by the emperor and wealth is represented by the pope. And I know that sounds funny, but we talk about that in the book. Love is represented by the lover's card and fame is represented by the chariot. Those represent material values or values that belong to the world of illusion, or as the Cathar referred to, the world of the evil god. So these people have forsaken their attachment to those things. So in other words, they see the things of the material world as something that has to be completely given up. They have kept themselves pure through regular fasting, and they would have 3 40-day fasts a year. In addition to regular weekly fasting, they were celibate and they were vegetarian. They regularly repented of their failings and they stayed true to the Lord's Prayer. It was an intrinsic part of what they committed to. And they devoted their lives to spreading the gospel of truth and approaching all that they did with loving kindness. They were committed to being merciful and seeking to be knowledgeable, but with understanding and wisdom. They were attuned to hearing the voice of God, and they had the courage to do the will of God, having heard that. They lived in awe of God, evidenced by lives filled with devotion and reverence, and ultimately they committed their lives to the extent that they didn't fear fire or water, judgment or condemnation. Now, this is quite significant because one of I think one of the poignant Cathar stories is the final nail in the coffin of the Cathars in southern France. Happened with the besieging of the fortress castle at Montsegur, and Montsegur is a castle that's set on the top of quite a high mountain, and during the latter part of 1243 going through to March 1244, there were 400 Cathar who had successfully been able to hold off the attacks of the ensuing armies at that particular point until it got to a point where they gave up. And in the process of giving up, they asked for 2 weeks to consider the terms of what they were going to, or prepared to do in terms of what was being asked of them by their captors. What ended up happening was that 200 of these people basically would not deny their vows that they had made as priests and voluntarily gave themselves up to execution, which in this case was being burnt at the stake. And these 200 perfecti were corralled at the bottom of the mountain and were burnt alive. And to this day, there's a stele, a commemoration plaque there that is in memory of these 200 perfecti who were burnt at the stake. The other 200 people, as part of what they had to do, was to give up their commitment to the church and to become Catholics in order to be excused from execution. Now, an interesting thing happened, and this is in Cathar folklore, is that 4 of the perfecti escaped from the mountain the night before this truce of 2 weeks came to a conclusion. And what they went to do was to rescue their hidden treasures that were hidden in a forest that were close by. And what we understand was that they were never seen of or heard of again. And of course, what we also know of is that for many, many years, hundreds of years, people have gone in search of the Cathar treasure. Many of them, of course, are looking for gold and silver and wealth of that form, but it's counterproductive given that the Cathar had no interest in material value at all. And so what we can perceive that the one thing that it certainly wouldn't have been would have been a search for any sort of worldly treasure. And so we can assume that this was spiritual treasure. And once again, one of the legends associated with the Cathar was that they were custodians of the Holy Grail. And so it could be assumed that this was knowledge associated with finding the Holy Grail, or it may have been the Holy Grail itself. We aren't certain, because as far as we know, that treasure was supposedly never recovered. However, my book is about proposing the idea that, in fact, that treasure that was secreted away from those forests on that fateful night was in fact knowledge, and I suspect it was probably manuscripts. We have a lot of evidence to show that the Cathar had a interest in knowledge and wisdom and understanding. There was a lot of art that included depictions of the Cathar with books, and there's a very good chance that what was secreted was in fact manuscripts, was knowledge. And my whole proposal in this book, The Spiritual Roots of the Tarot, the Cathar code hidden in the cards, is that in fact this knowledge was transposed into portable stained glass windows that later became known as the Marseille Tarot. And that what is depicted in these 22 picture cards, which are the trump cards, are the deep mysteries of finding the Holy Grail. And as I talked about in my introduction, that it describes a journey of passing the gatekeepers of the lions who are checking the quality of the heart before entering the dark night of the soul, which prepares you for the test of the flaming sword, which is the Abrahamic test, equivalent to sacrificing Isaac, which is about proving the state of your heart to God. It's then about going on this journey of adopting Christ consciousness, which is the test of the cherubim. And if you remember the Old Testament story, when Adam and Eve leave the Garden of Eden, God puts a flaming sword and cherubim at the eastern gate as tests that Adam and Eve have to pass in order to come back into the Garden of Eden. And so the Cathar built these tests into their knowledge. And so in these cards, we have a card that depicts a flaming sword. It's no coincidence, and it sits right beside the house of God in the sequence of card, which means that we're learning that this is one of the requirements for entering into the house of God. And then once in the house of God, we see the birth of Christ consciousness, and we see the sacred union of Christ and Sophia, which was a Gnostic principle, the Helios Gemos. And then we see the test of the cherubim, which then becomes the qualifying component for being able to answer the call of the Divine Mother, who is Sophia the Mother, and this is the ultimately entering the sacred yoni of the Divine Mother and the Holy Grail. Now, there's a lot of really quite significant language being used there, a lot of symbolic language being used there, and these guys beautifully portrayed all of this in these cards and in the symbology of these cards. And with the key that I was able to decipher 15 years ago, I was able to unlock that knowledge. And ultimately what this book is sharing with you what this spiritual journey is and what it takes to make this transition from a place of ignorance, which has us in our suffering, has us in our place of feeling unfulfilled, and for those of us in modern language, those of us who are dealing with lifestyle disease and depression and burnout and all of those sorts of things, to being able to have a life where we have health and well-being, where we have peace of mind, where we have a sense of purpose, where we're able to act with mercy and where we have social justice and a real desire to be an inspiration and to help inspire other people to find lives of meaning and lives with peace and joy. There's a simple language that describes it all, and it's the very last paragraph in my book, and I'd like to share this with you. The Cathar theology could be described in one word: kindness. And that's really what it's all about. It's about learning how to be kind in terms of developing the works of mercy around social justice, feeding the hungry and giving water to the thirsty. It's about housing the stranger. It's about clothing the naked, visiting the sick and those in jail, all the things that Jesus talked about as works of mercy. It's the kindness that's about the spiritual works of mercy, which is about the forgiveness that we bring. It's the kindness of forgiveness, which is about pardoning the wrongdoers. It's about loving your enemies. It's about praying for those who accuse you or condemn you. It's about turning the other cheek. It's learning how to go the extra mile. If somebody asks for your cloak, you give him your coat. If they ask you to go 1 mile, you go 2. It's about not judging and not condemning. It's about forfeiting the things of the world, which is about wealth, power, love and fame, and aligning yourselves with justice, mercy, love and compassion and peace. And then the very last paragraph says, the Cathar Code was all about having the fool become constantly mindful of the choice to demonstrate love through being kind to themselves, to others, and to the planet. This medieval theology of love was reflected in these words of John: Beloved, let us love one another, for love is of God, and everyone that loves is born of God and knows God. It was this devotion to this theology that resulted in the Cathar being called the good men and the good women. Thanks for taking time to listen to my video. I hope you get a little sense of what this is about. It's an amazing journey. The profundity of what was captured in these thought fossils, these portable stained glass windows that later became known as the tarot, certainly takes the tarot from its esoteric context to a deep spiritual theology. And I invite you to dip into it and immerse yourself in it and enjoy reading my book as I explore these and share these really profound, wonderful principles with you. And enjoy. Thank you. Bye.